Today, I'm speaking with Caroline Goyder. She is a speaker coach, and she's going to let us know how to find our voice. And it's absolutely fascinating what she's saying. And quite frankly, those are elements that we can implement immediately. So enjoy the conversation with Caroline Goyder. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. Today, I'm going to speak with someone that I know all of you would be interested in. Caroline Goyder is a speaker coach. She's helping all her clients to find their voice, to find the right tone. I'm almost stressed to say it because now I'm going to be judged on that, but she is very well known internationally. Based in the UK, if I'm not mistaken, but she has a TEDx talk that has been seen by 9 million people. She has 3 books. The last one is Finding Your Voice. And she has corporate client, actors, a lot of well-known people. Most importantly, she is very kind to take time to speak with me today. Caroline, so glad to have you on the show.
Eric, it's just lovely to be here. Delighted.
Thank you so much. We're going to talk about finding your voice, but also the way you position the tone of your voice, whether you're managing your team, whether you're speaking with customer. I remember the first time I spoke in public. It was in 1988 in the north of Denmark for a student organization called ISA. And I was so scared that my lips was glue. I had no more saliva in my mouth. And I keep an hour just putting my lips down, although I knew what I was talking about, but I was so scared. Am I unique, or is it something that everybody got?
It's so normal. I remembered my first TEFL teaching job where I stood in front of a bunch of very lovely Argentinians and Chileans and had a similar experience. It's that horrible feeling, isn't it, where time vanishes. We can't remember what we've said. Everybody feels really threatening, and our bodies are just reacting to this horrible threat. And if you experience that as a listener, it is a totally normal response to lots of people staring at you. But the good news is your primitive brain can be persuaded that it's not a life-threatening experience. And that's essentially what I do, Eric. I help speakers reframe that horrible moment of hell's mouth opening, as my drama school teacher used to call it, and turn it into a conversation with old friends. Because we can all chat with old friends, right? And if you can do that on
Absolutely.
stage in front of 2,000 people, you got it nailed. And that is all I do with people. It's a lovely job.
So you said you're a drama teacher. So you start studying already early in life, or was it after your high school or college that you went into that field?
I did a bit at school and I thought this is fun. But I went to Oxford to university and I wasn't a very good student. I didn't do very much work. But when I left, I thought, I really want to be an actor. So I trained, quite late. I was probably in my mid 20s, but I really wasn't very good. And if you want to know my origin story in terms of what I do, my origin story is really that I left university and got myself to drama school and was horrified to discover that this acting business was really hard, that it's really hard to be on stage and look relaxed. It's really hard to have presence when you're terrified. It's really hard to listen when your brain is full of disaster scenarios. And I've spent the last 20 years really unpicking what it means when someone says you have no presence, or what it means when someone says that was terrible, you're not listening,
Mhm.
or why did you react like that? And we think in the moment when someone says those things at work, it might be you don't have enough credibility or you're not engaging enough. We feel like we can't change, but we can change. And it is way easier than you can even dream.
You say you can change. I totally believe that. Is it something that is linked to the chemicals in the brain, or what is the process behind it, and what are the first thing that everybody should be aware of to overcome that fear?
So I'm very tangible, and I go back to a session I was running today. Okay. So this morning, I was with a group of medical researchers, and they are having to pitch what they do to a funding audience. And these are people who study respiration, they study lung conditions. So they know all about how speech works, really. But as we worked, I could see, because they're very clever people, they were doing things like they were going too fast. They were doing things like every time they hit a pause, they were mouth breathing. Or they weren't really engaging with the audience. They were so busy remembering what they were saying that their tonality was really flat. And so it's simple things like every time you hit a full stop, close your mouth and breathe a feeling of relief. Breathe it in. And suddenly, then, every sentence is separate and relaxed. Or it's before you do the presentation for the person whose tone is very flat, imagine that you're in the audience and you're listening to it and think about what you would need to engage you. Or imagine that you're talking to a clever 14-year-old and you need to slightly slow down and simplify it. And I am just addicted in my role to how quickly someone can move from flat tonality, rushed, to calm, centered, and engaging. I mean, I see people change in 5 minutes. It's the best
Mm.
hit of all. I would do that for free. And it comes from a very deep place of having been stuck and thinking I couldn't change and knowing now that you can change really quick. And I think
So you
that's
pause.
magic.
Yeah, it is magic. So you pause, you take a deep breath, and then you continue.
And what that does is resets your nervous system because the moment you described in Denmark in front of that audience is fight or flight. It's your
Right.
system looking at a bunch of people and your system saying they've all got sticks, you're in mortal danger. The
Mm.
reptilian brain is still like 1,000 years ago, right?
Yep.
And so you have to take your little reptilian brain and kind of give it a stroke and say, actually, these people are friends. They want you to do well. Now, we can do that mentally, so we can do some kind of mantra, but in terms of thinking fast and slow, it's too slow. We don't have time to say to ourselves, they're your friends, it's going to be fine when we're speaking. But we do have to take an in breath because all voice is out breath. So if you just take that lovely pause where you breathe a feeling of relief in, then your system resets and you're no longer in fight or flight. And I just wish everybody knew that.
So that's one of the thing you learn studying drama, or something that you discover afterward.
So when you learn to act, and in any country this is true, you spend a lot of time doing movement and voice. And they're teaching you how to breathe and they're teaching you how to stand. But what they're not really doing is making the connection between, standing up and being yourself. You're being Hamlet in that moment. So I've spent quite a long time working out, I hate the word hacks because it's a bit violent, but working out shortcuts. Because drama training doesn't really like shortcuts. It
Mm.
likes process, darling, and long warm-ups and things. But modern life, we need 5-minute shortcuts. And so I've spent 20 years really thinking about what are the things that I see work for people really quickly. And my job is to do those things fast for people rather than they don't have to go and do 3-year drama training because who has time, right? Nobody.
Well, probably they should. Now you told me that you did the drama school and you thought you were not exceptional, or you're not that good. I don't know the
I
exact.
am not a great actor. No, I'm not.
So when you're in your life, it's like a dream. You're going there. When do you realize that? And what's going on in your mind at that moment? And the reason I'm asking that question is that anybody's listening somehow, especially entrepreneurs, we're faced with moment in our lives where the question is, do we continue? Do we stop? So I'm very curious to know about that.
It's really hard, isn't it? So I would watch my classmates and I would see that there were just some people who were naturals. But I realized that I could learn to be a natural. I could learn to do what they were doing. The thing that made me change course was that in my heart, didn't want to kind of leave myself at the mercy of the business. An entrepreneur has a lot of agency. Even when things are going badly, you have agency. As an actor, you're not really in control. Hitchcock knew that. He talks a lot about it. As an actor, you're always waiting for that email, that phone call. And I wanted to have more agency. So it was partly an acknowledgement that I was never going to be Meryl Streep. which is useful to say to yourself. And then also an acknowledgement that in my heart of hearts, I didn't want it enough. And I think most entrepreneurs do want it enough, or you simply wouldn't be entrepreneuring because it's too hard. So as long as you know that you're in a place where your skills in a sweet spot, you're offering something that nobody else has, and as long as you know that you've got that fundamental drive to keep going and keep getting knocked down and keep getting back up, I think keep going. But as soon as the drive goes and you don't have the energy to get back up again, I think that's when you start to think about what else is there.
You speaking obviously with 20 years of experience, and you obviously know exactly what you want and why you're doing what you do today. But at that moment, what is going on in your mind, and
Mm.
what are the path that you're looking at going out of the drama school?
Well, it was funny because although I knew that I didn't want to be at the mercy of agents and managers, and after Harvey Weinstein, there's probably some quite good logic to that.
Yeah, yeah,
I did know that I loved the industry, and I did know that I loved in particular voice. So that, there's that lovely phrase, follow your bliss. It's a little bit hippie, but hey, so am I. And I slightly went, well, this isn't working, but I love that. And so I trained as a voice teacher. And it was just trusting the instinct that, oh, that interests me. And I do think, especially, for people who are in their 20s, there comes a point where you think, can I do any more studying? Can I really flip it again? And I think, yeah, flip it again. Trust until you find the thing that switches you on. Don't stick. I think there's a great Steve Jobs speech where he talks about that idea. Don't stick with things that don't feel right. Keep going
mm.
until you find the thing that really turns your lights on.
So you're doing that, you're starting to coach people, and then what is the feeling that you have the first time? And I'm sure you remember the first time you coached somebody, and there was a light bulb that they went in their head or right in their voice. What is that feeling at that moment, and how do you know? Yes, that's it.
That's a lovely question. I mean, it's the bit that makes me. If I won the lottery, I would do my job for free. It's the moment when you see in someone's face the relief that this is easier than they thought. And it's a release. It's like a kind of, oh, that's it. I've got this. And it's a little mini epiphany, a mini transformation. And it's often physical. It's that,
Physical.
yeah, it's that someone discovers that they can stand up in front of an audience and feel safe, or they discover that their voice doesn't have to shake, or they discover that they have presence and they can fill a room. And it's the closest I can describe it to is it's like having an X-ray on someone's system and seeing which piece of the system you need to open up or unlock in order that they can become the person that they're being, that they need. They know they can become this person, and it's just unlocking what's the piece of their system that's blocking that becoming, which sounds again a bit hippie. But honestly, it's the best thing. And when someone says to me, I did the speech in front of 4,000 people in Florida, I've got a lovely CMO client who went from, I can't do this speech, to standing in a big air hangar in front of 4,000 people in somewhere in Florida and just saying, I did it. And it's lovely to help, isn't it? It is
Absolutely,
just lovely to help.
absolutely. When you're coaching people, being originally Belgian, I was always told that the UK and the US are two countries separated by the same language.
So true.
So, what is it that you're doing different? And what would you advise somebody from the UK speaking in the US and somebody from the US speaking in the UK to do?
I think it's funny. I trained as a dialect teacher, and again, I'm not a very good actor. I'm also not a very good dialect teacher. But that when you study dialect, they say flood your ears with sound, right? So if you want to know how to speak Geordie, from Newcastle in the UK, or if you want to know how to speak Brooklyn, then what you've got to do is listen a lot to the patterns and the dialect and start to absorb it. And if I had been invited, say, to come and speak in Seattle, then before I go and speak, there's a few things I should do. Firstly, I need to really talk to my audience. So do your research. Have a
Hmm.
mini focus group with a few people who are going to be coming to the event and flood your ears with what drives them. It's like a mini insights session in an informal way. And then I would also be just putting into YouTube Seattle and seeing what comes up and listening to the dialect and listening to the energy and listening to the patterns. Because when we use words that aren't resonant for an audience, we switch them off. And it's
Absolutely.
almost like you need to slightly, they don't want you to change, they don't want you to become a character, but you do need to take on a little bit of the language, a little bit of the dialect. Bill Clinton was really good at this, actually. You know, whatever you think about his politics, when you watch him at a speech in Blackpool in the UK, there's a moment where he talks about how much he loves Blackpool. And it's a kind of, it's like a pacing, it's a matching of the audience, which is a
Mhm.
really powerful way to resonate. And it takes preparation. I'm sure his team were doing it for him, but for all of us as speakers, as you know, as pitchers, as entrepreneurs, just flood your ears with the place you're going to. Get a sense of who they are before. And a mini example of that is that my first book, I interviewed 40 A-list actors and I had to get to them. And when you're trying to approach Kate Blanchett or Kate Winslet, someone said to me, spend half an hour online listening to everything Kate Winslet says about what matters to her, and then distill a few phrases of what she said in the email you sent to her and her team. Because why would we say no to something that speaks to our deepest values? If you do that research, if you learn to speak their language in a way that's also resonant to you, why would they say no? They don't. And she said yes.
I love it. And when you say choosing the words with your local audience can help, but always think about this. I had a cooperative agency back in Europe, and one of the sales meeting we're doing for a major pharma company in Lisbon. There was on sales negotiation, and there was the number one speaker on the topic from the number one business school. He lost everyone because he was using example about baseball, and nobody plays baseball. And I mean, the only one in the audience were maybe the people from England that with cricket can relate a little bit, but that was it.
Yeah, and it's gone and you die, you know. And Bill
So,
Clinton wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that.
yeah. And someone said in the past, and I remember that sentence: "When you speak, it's to change the world."
Yeah, I love that.
I
I
think,
love that ambition.
and a good criteria would be if you give a speech that has been seen by 9 million people, exactly like you did, because your TEDx talk has been seen by 9 million people and counting. How did that come about, and how did you prepare yourself? Because you only have like 15 minutes to deliver your message.
I mean, that is a kind of magic that I did that talk and it's up to 9.6 now. I mean, the magic of YouTube is quite insane. I was the most prepared person on that TEDx Brixton stage that day. Okay, that is absolutely true. And someone said it at the time. And the reason I was the most prepared person on that stage is because the jeopardy of being a speaker coach who F's up a speech, even if only 1,000 people watch that speech, I knew that the jeopardy was big. And the talk is about speaking with confidence. So I was kind of amping up the jeopardy. So I knew that when they asked me to do it, it had to offer something new, a paradigm shift that probably nobody else was doing. And it also had to be quirky and creative and me. So the thing I think that made the biggest difference, and some of you will be listening to this and thinking, well, I'd like to do a TED talk. The thing I would offer is ditch PowerPoint, just forget
Hmm.
PowerPoint because it's done and it's boring, and look for a prop that brings your idea alive. I was working with a lovely woman called Denise Graveline in the US, and we were talking about this idea of the body being full of possibility, full of possibility for change. And there's a director called Peter Brook who talks about the actor opening up drawers in themselves that, that have never been opened before. This idea of infinite possibility. I think Walt Whitman calls it, I am multitudes. I have multitudes. So I went online and I searched for a prop that was a human chest of drawers. And it was some kind of, I don't know, black magic that up popped this image of this wooden chest of drawers shaped like a man's torso. I mean, it had nipples, which pleased me somehow. And it was the thing about this chest of drawers was that the guy who made it was a mile down the road from me in South London.
Really?
So I was like, this is too mad that we have to work together. So I emailed George, and then he said, yeah, I'll help out with your TEDx. And we had a prop, and then the speech, the talk came out of the prop. And as my primary school aunt said, she said every primary school teacher knows that opening up drawers and pulling out objects keeps a class entertained. And there are 3 drawers in this talk, and I take out 3 objects. And I think the combination of the slightly mad, half-naked man chest of drawers prop and then pulling out objects just engages an audience online, and then it keeps them with me. And so I would say to anyone, just push out the boundaries of what you think you should do with this idea and see if you can find a prop that takes it way further than you imagine, because that was the thing. That was the differential in that talk. Definitely.
Congrats on that. I mean, 15 minutes of your life. How many days, how many hours of preparation?
Yeah. So I remember the day that they asked me to do it. I think I had 3 months run in. I was in Oxford that day and I sat down on the steps of the Radcliffe Camera, which is a beautiful library in Oxford, and I just blocked out my diary. I think I gave myself a day a week over that time frame. And some of, the initial days in that day a week in that 3 month period were just time to dream and write and kind of come up with ideas. And I had a mind map on my wall in my office that changed. I do that when I write books as well. But then in the last month, we got beyond Zoom rehearsals. And in the last month, I had a stand-up comedy director coach called Chris Head. And we just workshopped it. And it's not a funny speech. I'm not a comedian in the way I'm not an actor. But what we did was make it really sharp. And although, good TED Talks seem conversational, they're actually like poems. They're crafted. So you're not word perfect, but every line lands bang, bang, bang. And that's what he helped me do. And the most important thing he helped me do was craft the last line. And that's a real stand-up comedian's trick, because when you know where you're going, you can enjoy the journey because you've got a good punchline. And I owe him everything for getting the punchline really sharp. It made such a difference. So it was a day a week over 3 months. And I think in the last week, probably I didn't do anything. I just focused on it because I knew I couldn't F it up. I just couldn't F it up.
Yeah. Yeah. So the number of rehearsal that you've had for those 15 minutes, I'm sure you don't even count them. Yeah.
A lot. And it's funny because I've worked with TED speakers since, and I work a lot with people making big speeches, and we talk a lot about leverage. How could I talk to 9.6 million people? How many lifetimes would I need?
Yeah.
And the investment of that day a week for 3 months in ROI terms was pretty good. And so I'm often talking to clients about leverage. What's the leverage of this speech? And if it's high leverage, put the hours in. Just don't overthink it.
Yeah. It just remind me when I was planning those sales meeting for corporation, I would ask, why do you do a sales meeting? And it would say, we do it every year. And I'm thinking, oh my God. But when they invest millions of pounds, euro, dollars, just to make sure that they have a great strategy for their organization. And when it comes to the execution and bringing everybody who's actually going to execute it, there's almost no budget left, let alone to make sure that the people going to deliver are doing it the best way to motivate people and pass the message. It's fascinating.
It's a blind spot. I've seen it so many times in agencies. And I think there's an assumption often with people who are senior forget how difficult it is to be a more junior person in those environments. And so there's an assumption, oh, we'll get it all sorted. The messaging's done, the comms are done, the deck's done. Right, let's go. And
Mm,
there is someone who's 24 who's never pitched to Unilever before, and they mess it up, and because you haven't given them the time. And you want, if it's high leverage, put the time in. You will
absolutely.
never regret it.
Yeah. And just not even outside, you say that pitching to Unilever, but even in your own organization, the first
Yep.
time you're presenting and every time you're presenting, it's very important. You were
It,
talking about mind mapping
oh
when you
yeah.
write books. Well, I just published a book for my daughters, nothing to do with the business, but I
Oh.
did exactly the same process. It's putting everything into a mind map. When you prepare for a speech, we talked about the time, we talked about the process, but when it comes to the ideas, can you take us a little bit about that? How do you collect all the ideas and how do you make a selection? Because I'm sure for those
Mm.
15 minutes, you could have spoken for 2 hours. So
Oh
how
yeah.
do you make a selection? How do you decide I'm going to keep that, but I'm going to get rid of that?
Well, the first thing I would say is that there is an enormous value in coaching for that, because I think when I work, well, if I go back to the specific of the TEDx, the idea evolved because of Denise Graveline and because of Chris Head. I had a bunch of ideas that I was very, there's a lovely expression in writing called murder your darlings, which is a bit brutal. But the idea that sometimes we're too close to things. And there were ideas that I really liked and I wanted to keep, but Chris or Denise would say, I don't get it. It doesn't resonate. And I think when you're working on a speech, do be open to feedback. And what we were looking for in the process was the ideas that kind of shone bright like diamonds, that were just fresh and resonant and people could remember. My process is mind map, come up with nice ideas, and then I love voice notes as an app on my phone. And I just think put voice notes on and just speak it. Because often what feels like a lovely, clever idea when you write it down, when you speak it, it just doesn't make any sense. And I think we often assess the messages better when we listen back to them. And I mean, I did road test that TEDx. I did it. You always do rehearsals in the TEDx process for your peers, but I took it out on the road and did it to a couple of corporates. Like stand-up comedians road test stuff in pubs, right? I think if you're working on a talk that again has high leverage, just try it out on a few people. It might be a real live audience, or it might be a few friends or your family or a colleague, but you'll find out very quickly what people laugh at, what they engage with, and where they start checking their phone. And that's data you can use.
Is it normal that I'm speaking with you and I feel very relaxed just listening to you?
Oh, that's a lovely thing to say. I feel the same with you.
Thank you very much. But really, you're the pace of your voice is very calm. And I'm sure you're projecting that when you're on stage or when you are coaching people. Today we have podcasts, we have Zoom. Obviously, there's the face-to-face, the phone, that thing called the phone. But there's so many different means of communication where, at the end of the day, your voice is always projecting. Do you use your voice in a different way when you are in person or when there's a camera, or is it the same
Hmm.
regardless?
Gosh, big question. I do a lot. So my voice used to be different. And when you say my voice is calm, if I had been interviewed, I don't know, 20 years ago, my voice would be slightly higher and faster and more effortful, and everything cost me more energy because I'm an introvert. And I was kind of trying a bit too hard. And the very tough lessons I had at drama school, where they had you had no presence, you're not listening, you're not centered, they were right. Okay. And I wasn't a good actor, but the lesson was fundamentally life changing because what they were saying to me is your body isn't centered. And so on a daily basis, I am doing little practices that keep me coming back to a place of centeredness. Because what I know from that hard lesson as an actor is when the body is centered and the breath is centered, we just show up as us. And I think about, the truly great speakers, the Luther Kings, we all have our examples. That's someone who was trained in the church to speak and then trained in politics. And, no matter where he was, that he would have had a presence about him and that his voice would have made you feel a certain way. So the message really is look after the instrument, which sounds very thespian, darling. But, look after your body, keep fit, learn how to breathe diaphragmatically, and your voice will develop an authenticity that is just you. And I know this because I didn't have it. I know this because this is something that I've
Mhm.
had to cultivate. And it's just lovely that you say my voice is calm because it wasn't. It wasn't.
Well, no, it's amazing. But I was saying that everybody is talking about authenticity. So listening to you, basically authenticity starts by being just centered. I mean, not just, but by being centered.
Yeah, it's massive. And the reason it's so massive right now is because most people are fundamentally decentered, if that's a word, by these things.
Hmm.
It's that if I do the classic kind of iPhone posture, it takes me, I do it, but it takes me off my spine. It cuts me off. My ribs push forward. My shoulders come up. My diaphragm can't move freely. My hips lock out. My knees lock out. And suddenly we're off our center. So just doing the attention to how am I standing? How am I breathing? How is that affecting how I show up? If you do that, you will be the 1% of people who are present, powerful.
Fascinating. Caroline, where do people can find your last book, and what type of information can they find in it?
Find Your Voice is all over Amazon and Audible, and it is all about what we've just discussed. It's about the voice and its potential to really voice anything you need to in life and allow you to step up and speak up and stand out. And Gravitas, the previous book, is about how we find authority and credibility as speakers. And they work quite well together as a duo. But I would say if you're a nervous speaker, read Find Your Voice. And if you're someone who wants more presence and impact in the world, read Gravitas, because that they have two different outcomes. And you can find all of them on carolinegoyder.com, which also has all sorts of assets, free courses, a digital course, lots of good stuff there.
Awesome. I can listen to you for hours, and I hope I'll have the opportunity to do that in the future. My last question for today: when we meet in 1 year with a bottle of champagne, what are we going to celebrate?
We're going to celebrate the launch of Master Your Meetings, which is my new course, because I've been thinking for the last 3 years, we were talking about podcasting. In
Yeah.
the time that you've been podcasting, I've been creating this course, and I am so excited about the possibility to scale what I do so that it can reach more people, because I just know how this stuff changes people. So
Mhm.
I will be so excited to sit down with a glass of champagne and share the success of Master Your Meetings. It's a deal.
Awesome. Thank you very much for taking the time today. And once again, I look forward to meeting you in person in the future.
A real pleasure, Eric. Lovely to chat. Thank you so much.
Caroline, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today and sharing your experience with your TEDx talk, the preparation, the breathing. Absolutely fascinating. And I know that using all those tools will help people have an impact in their organization. So thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please follow me on LinkedIn, connect on LinkedIn, or join my Facebook group, www.eventbusinessformula.com/group. And if you find on any value in this episode, as much as I did, please share it with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.